I don't know how long I've been sitting here, but the sun is starting to dip below the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. I've been watching her for almost an hour now, and she hasn't noticed me, or at least, that's what I tell myself. The window is cracked just enough to let in the cool evening breeze, the faint sound of a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. But it's her, my wife, that occupies my every thought. It wasn't always like this. We had a good marriage once, a quiet one. But something shifted. She changed, and I don't think I imagined it. I can't quite put my finger on when it started, but it's like a slow unraveling. Little things at first. Subtle things. A misplaced look, a change in routine, a lingering phone call. And then I started noticing things that I couldn't ignore. The men's cologne that would linger in the air when I walked into the house, the faint smell on her clothes. The odd feeling of fresh sheets when I knew I hadn't changed the bed. I started to notice it in the kitchen too, the smell of something or someone I couldn't place. And the odd way she'd pull her phone away from me whenever I got too close. At first, I thought I was imagining things, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But it didn't stop. It only got worse. So I began watching her more closely, lurking like a ghost in the corners of our home. Always quiet, always unseen. But today, something feels different. She's in the kitchen now, her back to the window. Her movements are quick, almost jittery. She's washing dishes, but there's something in her posture that's off, like she's waiting for something. Or someone. I can't see her face, but I can imagine it. The tightness in her jaw, the slight furrow in her brow. She's always been a bit of a perfectionist, but today, she's washing those plates like they've done something wrong. My heart picks up a beat. I don't know why I feel like this, why I'm suddenly on edge as though something is about to happen. Maybe it's the way her hand jerks when the phone rings. Maybe it's the fact that she's been glancing at the front door every few seconds, like she's expecting someone. I lean closer to the window, feeling the coolness against my face. A part of me wants to keep watching, but another part of me, something darker, is telling me to stop. To walk away. But I can't. Not yet. A soft chime. A message, I think. Her phone buzzes on the counter. She doesn't pick it up immediately, but her eyes dart toward it, her lips pressing into a tight line. She hesitates for a moment, her fingers stilling above the plate she was drying. Then, slowly, as though it's the most normal thing in the world, she picks it up, presses it to her ear. My breath catches. I know I shouldn't be doing this. Shouldn't be watching her like this. But I can't look away. She speaks in a low voice, the words soft, almost intimate. I'm not sure. He's home. He might be watching. I'll have to be careful, she says, her voice hushed, but I hear it clearly, sharp as glass. My chest tightens, and the world goes quiet for a moment, as if the air itself is holding its breath. She lowers the phone, glances quickly toward the door, and then, almost as if to reassure herself, she turns her attention back to the dishes. I can't breathe, can't think. My mind is racing. Who is she talking to? What did she mean by careful? It's in moments like these, when something feels wrong, but you can't quite prove it, that doubt begins to take root. And when doubt takes root, it grows like weeds, strangling everything else. I've been watching her long enough now to know that she's hiding something from me. Something big. But I don't know what it is, and part of me isn't sure if I want to know. I push myself away from the window. My heart is pounding, but I feel a sense of resolve settle in my stomach. It's time to confront her. I move toward the door, pausing briefly to glance back one last time. The shadows have deepened, and she's still standing there, her back to me, her voice still soft on the phone. I don't know if she knows I'm watching, but I'm sure of one thing. She's hiding something. I open the door quietly, trying not to alert her. The hinges creak softly as I step inside, and the moment the door clicks shut behind me, I hear it. Oh my God, he came, she says, her voice barely audible. I freeze, my hand still on the doorknob. I didn't imagine it. She said it. But I don't react. I don't let her know that I heard her. I can't let her see how much this is already eating away at me. So, I do nothing. I stand there, pretending I didn't hear the words that feel like a bullet lodged deep in my chest. And as I take my first step into the kitchen, My mind is consumed with the question that I know I can't answer yet. Who is she talking to? And what the hell is going on? I walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my face as neutral as possible, but my mind was a storm of suspicion and unease. The door clicked shut behind me, and before I could even process my thoughts, she looked up, her face lighting up in an instant. Her expression was normal. Too normal. Too practiced. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice bright, almost too cheerful. I froze for a split second, unsure of how to react. She wasn't supposed to be this calm, this carefree. My pulse quickened, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time to show anything, wasn't the time to let her see that I knew. I had to stay composed, even if it felt like everything inside me was unraveling. She stood up, moved toward the stove with that easy grace of hers, and placed a plate of food in front of me. It looked delicious, too delicious, like nothing was wrong. As if nothing had changed. She didn't miss a beat, her eyes sparkling as she began talking about her day, about her clients, about the stupid drama at work, about the weather. It was as though nothing had happened, as though I hadn't just heard her whisper to someone on the phone, or saw her so tense earlier. I should have been paying attention. I should have been listening. But all I could think about were the words she had said before, the way her voice trembled ever so slightly when she mentioned me. "I'm sorry, my husband is here." It was like the echo of her voice was still in my head, wrapping around my thoughts like a noose. She smiled at me, her eyes bright, but all I could do was stare at her, barely hearing the story she was telling, watching every movement of her hands, her face, the way she ate. She was pretending. The cheerful act was thin, a mask she was wearing, and it was starting to crack. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The more I questioned myself, the more it didn't add up. I couldn't stand the distance between us any longer, the silence that had stretched between us in recent weeks, and the fear that gnawed at my gut. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep pretending. The words burst out of me before I even realized I was going to say them. "I've had enough." My voice was sharp, louder than I intended, cutting through the room like a knife. "Tell me what you're hiding from me. Why the hell are you so distant?" Her face froze. For a second, everything stopped. She blinked as if she couldn't quite process what I had said. The plate in her hand wobbled slightly, and she set it down on the table with a soft clink. I could see her whole body tense up, her back straightening, the color draining from her face. She didn't speak at first, just stared at me, wide-eyed, as though I had slapped her. The sudden silence between us was deafening. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweating. She didn't move, didn't say anything for a long time. I thought she might break down, but she didn't. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice shaking, the smile completely gone now. She turned away as if to collect herself, and then looked back at me, but I could see it, the fear, the uncertainty in her eyes. I pushed forward. I couldn't stop myself now. "What are you hiding from me? Don't pretend. I know something's going on. You're different. You've been acting different for weeks, and I want to know what the hell is going on." I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She opened her mouth to say something, but then stopped herself, her eyes flicking nervously toward the window, toward the door. She took a deep breath, as if trying to gather her thoughts. "Are you seriously accusing me of something?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly recovered, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. "Why would I hide anything from you?" Her words were so out of place, so wrong. The more she spoke, the more it felt like a performance. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her napkin, dabbing at her face like she was fighting back tears. "Darling," she said softly, almost pleading. "I'm not hiding anything from you. I love you. I would never hide anything from you, never." She said it with such conviction that I almost believed it, for a moment. The way she looked at me, her eyes wide with something that could have been fear or guilt. She let out a soft sob, her chest rising and falling as if she were trying to control the wave of emotions threatening to spill over. "I swear, I'm not hiding anything. I love you. I do. Please, don't think that of me." I stood there, frozen, watching her cry. Something in me shifted, and I felt my anger, the storm inside me, begin to quiet. I stood there, unsure of what to believe. I had wanted answers, but now that they were right in front of me, I didn't know what to do with them. I had accused her of something terrible, something I wasn't sure she had done. What if I was wrong? What if I had overreacted, let my paranoia twist the truth? I felt suddenly ashamed, like a weight had dropped into my stomach. My fists unclenched, my shoulders sagged. I didn't know what came over me. I'm sorry, I stammered, my voice softening. I don't know what came over me. It's been a lot, you know? Work, everything, my words sounded hollow even to my own ears. I was trying to cover up the cracks, to piece together the fragments of trust that had shattered in the heat of my suspicion. She stopped crying for a moment, looking up at me through tear-streaked eyes. "It's okay," she whispered, reaching for me, her hands trembling. "It's okay. I'm not hiding anything, I swear. I love you." I didn't know what to say anymore. I felt like a fool. I walked over to her and pulled her into an embrace, her arms wrapping around me like a lifeline. She held me tight, and for a moment, I let myself believe her. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe I was wrong. But the knot in my stomach didn't go away. It only tightened. She held me for what felt like forever, her arms wrapped around me, her whispers of love like a balm to the rawness I felt inside. "I love you," she kept saying over and over, like a chant, as if saying it enough would make everything right. "I would never hide anything from you. You're everything to me." I didn't know why, but I believed her. For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe it, let myself believe that my mind had been playing tricks on me. The anger, the fear, the suspicion, it all seemed so foolish in that moment, so irrational. How could I accuse her without proof? She was right. I was the one in the wrong. I felt a flush of shame wash over me. How could I have doubted her, my wife, the woman I've shared my life with? The one who had stood by me for so long. I started berating myself, calling myself every name in the book. What a fool I had been. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing at all. I pulled away from her just a little, enough to look into her eyes, and I kissed her forehead, telling her how sorry I was. She didn't seem to hold it against me. Instead, she just smiled softly and kissed me back. It was like she could read my mind, like she knew exactly how guilty I felt. She reassured me once more that everything was fine, that she loved me, and that was enough. That was all I needed to hear. We went to bed shortly after, her soft lips kissing me like she always did, tenderly, as though nothing had changed. But as soon as my head hit the pillow, I felt that knot in my chest return. It wasn't enough to push me into full awareness, but I could feel it, this weight that pressed down on me. I rolled over, trying to get comfortable, but sleep didn't come. The hours dragged on, and soon the house was quiet, the moon casting pale light through the window. But it wasn't quiet in my mind. No, my thoughts were loud. Louder than ever. I began drifting in and out of sleep, my mind spiraling, but every time I closed my eyes, the same nightmare returned. It wasn't one of those chaotic, vivid dreams that make no sense. It was different. It was quiet. Too quiet. In the dream, I was in our living room, watching her from a distance. She was talking to someone. She was laughing, smiling. She was comfortable, too comfortable. The way she looked at him, it wasn't how she looked at me. She leaned in, her hand brushing his arm, and in that moment, everything inside me froze. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then, just as I was about to approach them, she turned, catching me watching, and her eyes weren't filled with love. They were filled with something else. Something cold. Something I didn't recognize. I woke up, gasping for air, my heart pounding. The room was dark, and the silence was almost suffocating. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. I glanced at her, still lying peacefully next to me, her breathing soft and steady. She was just sleeping. But I wasn't. I couldn't. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling like vultures. My mind started playing the same scenes over and over. The phone calls, the faint traces of cologne, the subtle changes in her behavior. I tried to push it away, but it wouldn't go. It was like something deep inside me was screaming that I was right, that there was something I was missing, something she was hiding. I glanced at the clock. 3:13 a.m. Too late, or too early, depending on how you looked at it. The house was still, the world outside was still. But in my head, everything was spinning. I couldn't sleep again. I sat up in bed, my mind racing. Every moment from the last few weeks was replaying itself, twisting and turning until it didn't make sense. But then the pieces started to fall into place. All the little things I had noticed. The phone calls that stopped when I walked into the room. The way she would always text when I wasn't around. How she became defensive when I asked the simplest questions. I thought it was just my imagination at first, but now I wasn't so sure. I began to think about what she said earlier, when she was crying, holding me so tightly. I love you. I would never hide anything from you. I knew it sounded sincere, too sincere, but something about it felt rehearsed. Like she had practiced it, like she had been waiting for me to accuse her, ready with the perfect response to deflect my suspicion. Was she trying to gain my trust? I kept asking myself, could that be it? Was everything she said just part of a plan? A plan to lull me back into a sense of security? My gut twisted. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became. Every single thing that had been eating at me these past few weeks, it all pointed to one conclusion. She was hiding something. Something big. The doubts that I had tried so hard to bury were back in full force, flooding me with a cold certainty. She had to be hiding something. I wasn't imagining it. The signs were all there. She was too careful around me. Too perfect. She was playing me like a fiddle, and I had fallen for it. I got out of bed, trying not to disturb her. The silence in the house felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me. I stood in front of the window, staring out into the night, my mind spiraling. I thought about the phone call I had overheard, the look in her eyes when she told me I was wrong. The way she had apologized and reassured me. It was all a performance. And I had fallen for it. I could no longer shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The morning light broke through the blinds, casting long shadows on the bedroom floor. I was still awake, even though I hadn't slept much. The events of the night, the doubts, the nightmares, they swirled in my mind like a storm I couldn't control. But I had to pretend. I had to play my part and make everything seem normal. As she stirred beside me, I acted like nothing had changed. I forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "I'm going to work," I said, trying to sound casual, like the man I used to be before all this doubt crept in. She smiled back, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Have a good day," she said, her voice soft and gentle. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was already thinking ahead, already planning my next move. I didn't head to work. Instead, I waited until she had left the house, just like I did every morning. I gave her time to get dressed, to prepare, to slip into her routine. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself this wasn't a mistake. But deep down, I knew I was making a choice, a dangerous choice. As soon as the front door clicked shut behind her, I slipped out the back, following her from a distance, like a shadow. She had no idea I was there. I stayed far enough behind to not attract attention, but close enough to keep her in sight. I kept my head low, my hands stuffed in my pockets, pretending to be just another person out for a walk. She walked with purpose, like she always did. Her pace was steady, her head held high. But there was something different about her today. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel the tension in the air. Her every movement felt deliberate, like she knew someone was watching. But I was careful. I stayed far enough behind, making sure she couldn't sense me. She was walking toward her office, a 30-minute walk from our house, just like every day. But today, I wasn't going to let her out of my sight. I wasn't going to let her disappear into the world of work and leave me behind, wondering where she went, what she was doing. The closer we got to her office, the more my heart began to race. I had no plan, no backup plan, no idea what I would do once I got there. Would I confront her? Would I follow her inside? I couldn't decide, so I just kept walking, keeping my distance. She was talking the entire way, on the phone with someone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell by the cadence of her voice that she wasn't alone. She was laughing at one point, then speaking more seriously at another. I strained to hear, but I couldn't make out anything. It was as if she was being careful, knowing that she was being listened to. And maybe, just maybe she was. She turned the corner and entered her office building, disappearing inside without a glance back. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I follow her inside? That would be too obvious. She would know I was there. No, I had to wait. I had to be patient. I found a cafe across the street and sat down. I ordered a coffee to pass the time, my hands shaking as I gripped the cup. The place was nearly empty, save for a few regulars sipping their drinks, lost in their own worlds. But I wasn't lost in anything. I was watching her building like a hawk, waiting for any sign, any clue that would give me the truth I needed. I waited an hour that felt like a lifetime. And then I saw him. A tall man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that screamed money. He pulled up to the building in a sleek black Maybach, the kind of car you only see in magazines. The car glinted in the morning sun, the tinted windows almost like a shield, hiding what was inside. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, waiting. Watching. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain why I felt the knot in my stomach tighten, why my heart began to pound in my chest. But I couldn't look away. I had to watch him. Had to know who he was waiting for. And then, just like that, I saw her. She came out of the office building, stepping onto the sidewalk with a purposeful stride. My breath caught in my throat. I was too far away to hear, but I could tell by the way she walked that she wasn't just heading to a taxi. She wasn't rushing off to a meeting or grabbing a coffee with a colleague. She was walking straight toward the Maybach. The man didn't even move. He didn't look at her, but I saw her slip into the car. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and the Maybach slowly began to pull away from the curb. My heart slammed against my chest. Oh hell no. I didn't think. I didn't care. I jumped up from my seat, knocking my chair over in my haste. I ran out the door, following the car down the street, my legs pumping as fast as they could. But the Maybach wasn't slowing down. It sped off, faster than I could run. My breaths came in ragged gasps, my feet pounding the pavement, but the car was already a block ahead of me. I couldn't catch it. I couldn't get close enough. The tinted windows mocked me, hiding everything from view, protecting whatever secret they were carrying inside. I ran harder, desperate, but it was no use. The car was disappearing around a corner, and I was left there, standing in the middle of the street, panting, my body shaking from the adrenaline. I stopped. My chest heaved, and I wiped my face with my hand, trying to calm myself down. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. What the hell was going on? I was losing control. I could feel it slipping away, and yet I couldn't stop myself. I was consumed with the need to know, the need to find the truth, whatever it might be. My mind was still racing, my heart pounding in my chest as I trudged home, unsure of what to do next. The rush of adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving me with nothing but the raw emptiness of confusion. I should have gone to work. I should have kept myself busy. But the thought of going back to the office after what I just witnessed seemed impossible. I couldn't think about anything else. My head was full of her, of that car, of the man waiting for her. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. The lies, the suspicions, the growing certainty that I was being played. It all felt like too much. I needed answers. I needed to search. I needed to find something, anything, that would tell me what was going on. I decided. The house. I'd search the house. I didn't care if she'd see me or not. There had to be something. There had to be a clue I had missed, something that would prove I wasn't going crazy. Maybe I'd find a phone bill with strange numbers. Maybe a receipt or a note. It didn't matter what. I was going to find it. As I walked, my mind kept racing. I was barely paying attention to the street around me, my eyes fixed on the ground ahead. But then, suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out without thinking, the screen lighting up with her name. Hello. Her voice was sweet, almost too sweet. It felt off. Hey, how's your day going? She asked casually, almost as if she didn't know I'd been following her. How's work? For a split second I froze. I had to think fast, pretend that everything was normal. It's Fine, I said, the lie slipping out before I could stop it. A lot of work today. Probably won't be home until late, maybe 10 p.m. She was quiet for a second as if processing the words. Then she responded, her voice suddenly soft, almost affectionate. Okay, I'll wait for you. I didn't respond immediately, my mind still reeling from the conversation. I wanted to say something, ask her where she was, what she was really doing, but I knew that would give everything away. Instead, I just let the silence hang there for a moment. Then, just as I was about to hang up, I heard it, her voice, suddenly sharp and panicked. Shit. I froze again. What? I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. But she had already hung up. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. People were looking at me, probably thinking I was some kind of lunatic standing there in the middle of the street, but I didn't care. My mind was consumed with the single word she'd said. Shit. What did that mean? Why had she said it like that? And why had she hung up so quickly? I stuffed the phone back into my pocket, turning and continuing my walk home. My mind felt foggy, but the one thing that kept cutting through the haze was that word. Shit. It echoed in my ears like a warning, a sign that something wasn't right. She was hiding something and it was big. As I approached our block, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a black car parked just down the street. My breath caught in my throat, and I knew immediately what it was. The Maybach. The same car I had seen earlier. My legs moved before my brain could process it. Oh shit. I couldn't stop myself. I ran toward the car, my feet pounding against the pavement, my heart in my throat. The Maybach sat there, idling, its tinted windows reflecting the sun. My mind screamed at me to stop, to think about what I was doing, but I couldn't. I reached the car, standing next to it for a moment, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know what to do next. Should I look inside? Should I wait for her to come out? I couldn't take it anymore. It all felt like it was happening in slow motion, my heart pounding, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. As I watched her smile at him, my mind snapped. I didn't know how I got there, but I was standing in front of the Maybach, the door to my house still in my peripheral vision. I could feel the anger swelling up in my chest, pushing me forward, suffocating everything else. The sound of their laughter, the way she touched him, it all burned in my mind. The lies, the deception, the years of marriage that now felt like a cruel joke. I had no control anymore. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I didn't care who saw me. I just wanted answers. I just wanted to make it stop. I started walking toward the front door, my hands clenched into fists, my mind consumed by a single thought. I know what's inside. I know what she's been doing. When I reached the door, I didn't even hesitate. I was beyond reason. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I grabbed the door handle, twisted it. It was locked. I could feel the rage boiling over, the frustration of being kept out, of being left in the dark. Without a second thought, I kicked the door in. It splintered, the wood cracking under the pressure. My mind was a haze of fury. I didn't care about the damage. I didn't care about anything anymore. I stepped inside. I didn't even give myself a moment to think. I just shouted, "You're a fool." The words flew out of my mouth, raw, untamed, echoing through the empty hall. I didn't know where they were, but I didn't need to guess. The smell of something strange filled the air as I moved toward the kitchen. My legs felt weak, like they were moving of their own accord, but I couldn't stop. The kitchen door was open, and that's when I saw it. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. My wife, sitting on the kitchen table without clothes. And across from her, another man, also without clothes. His arms were raised in the air, as if frozen in some ridiculous pose. What were they doing? My brain struggled to comprehend what was happening. The sight didn't seem real, but it was. They weren't even trying to hide it. I could see everything, the way he looked at her, the way she smiled back at him. It was like a slap in the face. A punch to my gut. I don't know how it happened, but I snapped. My body moved without thought. I grabbed the nearest object, the first thing I could find, an empty bottle, a vase, anything, and threw it at them. I didn't care what it was. "This is what you're doing?" I screamed, my voice raw, hoarse. I was no longer in control. My rage took over. I threw whatever was within reach, my arms flailing, my mind screaming, "How could you do this to me?" She didn't even flinch. She didn't try to stop me. Instead, she stood up, her face twisted with anger, and she started shouting at me. Her voice, cut through me like a knife. "I want to be rich," she yelled. "I'm tired of living like this. I've had enough of you." She pointed at me, her finger trembling with fury. "You're nobody. You're nothing. You've grown old, you're ugly. You save on everything, you can't even provide for me, for us. You've made me into a joke." Her words were like daggers, stabbing deep into my chest, twisting the knife with every syllable. I stood there, frozen, my mind a whirl of disbelief. I couldn't respond. I couldn't find the words. My breath came in ragged gasps as her insults tore through me. I wanted to shout back, but I couldn't. I was in shock. This wasn't the woman I had married. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. I didn't even know what to say. But then, something snapped inside me. I screamed. It was a primal sound, one that came from deep within, something that had been building up for months, for years. I screamed until my throat was raw. "Get out of my house!" I shouted, barely able to control the anger that surged through me. "Before I do something bad." She didn't hesitate. She didn't argue. The man didn't say a word. He didn't even look back at me. He followed her out of the kitchen, out of the house, without a second glance. The door slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed in my ears. But as my wife stepped toward the door, she turned around, her eyes flashing with something cold, something cruel. She looked at me one last time. "Goodbye, you fool," she spat. I couldn't stop myself. I picked up a vase, the nearest thing to me, and threw it at the door, but it didn't feel like enough. I was still burning with anger, with betrayal, with the weight of everything that had just shattered in front of me. I grabbed a bottle of champagne from the table. She'd left it open, forgotten in the chaos, and without thinking I ran outside, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached the Maybach, the sleek, black car that had taunted me all day. The car that had carried them both away just a few hours ago, like some twisted symbol of everything I had failed to protect. I swung the bottle at the car. It shattered against the hood, the glass crunching on impact. I didn't stop. I felt the rush of fury again, that overwhelming sense of injustice. The bottle had scratched the surface, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't done. I ran to the car, my fists clenched, and slammed myself against the door, my shoulder pressing into the cold metal. I could hear the man inside, pounding on the window, shouting, angry. But I didn't care. I wasn't listening to him anymore. I wasn't listening to anyone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The weight of everything had come crashing down on me like a wave, drowning me in confusion, rage, and betrayal. I stood there in the street, my hands still clutching the empty champagne bottle, staring at the damage I had caused. My mind was spinning. My wife had left me, and with her, my entire life had unraveled. I knew they'd be coming for me. I knew they would want revenge. She would make sure of it. The man in the Maybach. He was dangerous, cold, and he had just seen me at my most vulnerable. It was only a matter of time before they came after me. I couldn't stay. Not here. Not in the house where it all fell apart. I dialed Brian's number. I didn't even think. He was the one person who had always been there for me, even when I was too proud or too blind to see it. I needed him now more than ever. "Brian, it's me. I need you to come over. Please." I didn't even have the strength to explain. He could hear the panic in my voice, and he didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'm on my way." As I hung up, I knew what I had to do. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to stay in the place where everything had fallen apart. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started packing. I didn't care about the details. I didn't care about clothes, about anything that wasn't important. I packed my things, my watches, my jewelry, the things I had worked so hard for. And then I packed hers too. Anything valuable, anything that could give me a sense of control in a world that now felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I knew I couldn't take everything, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with everything I had left. Brian arrived about 30 minutes later, his truck pulling up the driveway. I opened the door before he could knock. His face was drawn with concern, but he didn't say anything. He could see it in my eyes. There was no need for words. "Tell me what happened," Brian said, his voice low, careful. He followed me into the living room as I threw the last of my things into the suitcase, locking eyes with me in the process. I sat down on the couch, shaking my head. I couldn't believe any of this was real. The last few hours felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I told him everything I had seen, everything I had felt. I didn't hold back. I told him about the car, about her betrayal, about the man in the Maybach. How she had left me, how she had used me, how she had torn my heart to pieces. Brian didn't say much. He just listened, his face full of sympathy. He had always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. He'd been my friend since high school, and now, in my darkest moment, he was the only person I could count on. "Come on," he said after a while. "Let's get out of here. You can't stay. You need to get away. You need to clear your head." He was right. I couldn't stay. Not in that house. Not with the memories of everything that had happened. I followed him to his truck, my suitcase in hand. We didn't talk much as we drove. The silence between us was heavy, but it was a relief. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to think. I just wanted to get away. The drive felt endless. 3 hours of silence, 3 hours of my mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 whats. All I could think about was her, the way she had left me, the things she had said, the betrayal that ran deeper than I could have imagined. I cried. I didn't want to. I didn't want to break down in front of Brian, but I couldn't stop it. The tears came unbidden, raw and painful, pouring out like a flood that I could no longer contain. I felt like I was losing everything, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Brian didn't say a word. He just drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes focused on the road. Every so often he'd glance over at me, but he didn't press me to talk. He knew I wasn't ready. When we finally reached my second home, the old house that I had kept hidden away for years, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. The house was almost falling apart, a relic of a past life. But in that moment, it felt like the only place where I could hide from everything. I needed to be alone. I needed to think, to process, to find a way forward. I spent the next few days in that house, sitting in silence. I didn't leave. Brian came by every day, checking on me, but I didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want to face the world. I didn't know how to move on. But slowly, as the days passed, something inside me began to shift. Brian encouraged me to get out of that dark hole, to pull myself together. He took me to the sea, a place I hadn't been to in years. The waves crashing against the shore felt like a reminder that life moved on, no matter what happened. It was there that I met someone new. She was different. She didn't know about my past. She didn't know about the woman who had broken my heart. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something real, something I hadn't felt in so long. We started dating. It was a new beginning, a new chapter. I moved to California with her. It wasn't easy. I had scars, I had baggage, but with her, I felt like I could breathe again. As for my wife, I heard rumors. There were whispers that she had been in a bad accident. Something about the Maybach. The details were fuzzy, but the word in town was that she was in the hospital, recovering from the crash. Part of me felt nothing. Another part, though, felt empty. I couldn't help but wonder, did she feel anything? Was she still the same person who had betrayed me, or had she changed? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was moving on.